In a packed courtroom, the U.S. attorney stood and spoke words that pierced the silence. Emmanuel, he said, wasn't taken by a stranger. He never left that home alive. And what happened to him was not a mystery. It was a lie. What the U.S. attorney said about baby Emmanuel Haro stunned the court. And as that courtroom sat in silence, a deeper truth emerged. Not just about what may have happened to this child, but about how easily we can overlook the quiet warning signs until it's far too late. If you're listening, I need your attention because Emmanuel's voice deserves more than silence. In criminal investigations involving children, understanding behavior before and after the alleged crime can be crucial, not just to build a legal case, but to understand the deeper patterns that may have gone ignored. Jake Haro's history raises serious concerns. In a prior child abuse case from 2023, he was convicted after an incident involving his infant daughter, Carolina. That case left a lasting impact, not only on the child, but on public trust in the systems meant to intervene. Despite the conviction, Jake did not serve prison time. He was placed on probation and completed a parenting course. Evaluators considered him low risk to reoffend. But the current charges suggest that the situation may have been more serious than originally assessed. Rebecca Haro's behavior followed a different trajectory. After Emmanuel was reported missing, she gave a tearful public statement. She appeared visibly bruised, and there was early speculation about whether she too might have been a victim. But as law enforcement began to question her version of events, she quickly withdrew from cooperating. It's unclear whether that choice was driven by guilt, fear, or something else entirely, but the shift raised immediate red flags for investigators. In court, both parents entered not guilty pleas. There were no visible displays of distress or remorse. Their demeanor appeared composed. What stood out most, though, was the stance of the U.S. attorney. Prosecutors refused any offer of a plea deal, an unusual move at this stage. The reasoning? They believe key facts are being withheld, and that both defendants know more than they are saying. In legal settings, silence can be protective, but when a child's fate is still unclear, silence can also carry weight. Sometimes, it doesn't just withhold the truth, it delays justice. From the beginning, investigators treated the case of baby Emmanuel Haro with urgency, but also with skepticism. When Rebecca Haro first told authorities that her son had been abducted from a parking lot, her emotional account prompted immediate search efforts. But it didn't take long before detectives noticed inconsistencies in her version of events. The timeline didn't add up. Physical evidence didn't match the scenario described. And when questioned further, Rebecca abruptly stopped cooperating with law enforcement. That moment became a turning point in the investigation. Search warrants were quickly issued. Law enforcement combed through the family's home in Cabazon and seized Jake Haro's vehicle. Investigators also reviewed surveillance footage from the area, analyzed phone data, and retrieved digital communications. These forensic steps were essential in determining that no credible evidence supported the kidnapping claim. Instead, the focus shifted inward toward the home, the history, and the individuals closest to Emmanuel. In the days that followed, search teams expanded their efforts. With assistance from cadaver dogs, law enforcement agencies canvassed areas near freeways and rural zones in Riverside County. Though Emmanuel's remains have not yet been located, officials have publicly stated they believe they are closing in on his possible location. The Sheriff's Department continues to lead the effort, supported by forensic specialists and trained K-9 units. What gave this investigation even more weight was the revelation of Jake Haro's prior conviction. In 2023, he was found guilty of felony child abuse involving a different child, his infant daughter. That case resulted in long-term injuries. Prosecutors in the Emmanuel Haro case are using that history to establish both motive and capacity. It's not just about what may have happened, it's about a pattern of harm, and of warnings that may not have been taken seriously enough. Investigators are building their case piece by piece through digital evidence, forensic searches, and testimony from those familiar with the home environment. And while many questions remain, one thing is increasingly clear. This was never the random kidnapping it was first made out to be. This was something else, something closer to home, and far harder to look away from. At the center of this case is a baby boy named Emmanuel Haro. He was just 7 months old, a child whose life had barely begun, and who, according to prosecutors, never had the chance to see his first birthday. His parents, Jake and Rebecca Haro, are now facing charges for his murder. Jake is 32. He has a prior conviction from 2023 for felony child abuse involving another of his children. At the time, he avoided prison, receiving probation and court-ordered parenting classes. Rebecca, his wife, is 41. She has no known criminal history, but is now charged as a co-defendant in the death of her infant son. Leading the prosecution is Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin. His office has taken a strong stance in this case, criticizing not only the actions of the parents, but also the judicial failures that may have allowed this tragedy to happen. The case officially began on August 14, 2025, when Rebecca Haro told authorities that Emmanuel had been abducted. She claimed she was attacked while changing him in the back of her car at a strip mall parking lot in Yucaipa. An Amber Alert was issued. Search efforts began immediately. But behind the scenes, investigators were already seeing signs that something didn't add up. Within 48 hours, law enforcement began to doubt the abduction story. Details in Rebecca's account were inconsistent. Surveillance footage and digital records didn't support her version of events. By the end of the week, authorities announced that they no longer believed Emmanuel had been kidnapped at all. Instead, they now believe he died days earlier at home, and that the kidnapping was a cover story designed to mislead investigators. If you're still with me, don't just listen. Let your outrage drive change. To understand the full scope of this case and the urgency behind the charges, it's important to walk through the timeline, not just for the legal facts, but for what they reveal about the systems, the decisions, and the possible cover-up surrounding baby Emmanuel's disappearance. August 14, 2025. Rebecca Haro tells authorities that while she was changing Emmanuel's diaper in a parking lot in Yucaipa, a man assaulted her and abducted the baby. An Amber Alert is issued. Regional news outlets report the story, and a multi-agency search begins almost immediately. At that moment, the nation believed they were searching for a missing child. August 16th. Just 2 days later, investigators confront Rebecca about several inconsistencies in her story. Her account doesn't match surveillance footage or location data. Instead of clarifying, she stops cooperating altogether. That decision changes everything. From that point forward, law enforcement no longer treats her as a victim. They begin looking at her as a suspect. August 18th. With probable cause now established, investigators execute multiple search warrants. They comb through the Haro family's home in Cabazon. They seize digital devices, review phone data, and collect surveillance footage from the neighborhood and surrounding areas. The results strengthen their suspicions. There was no evidence Emmanuel was ever at the location where he was reported missing. August 22nd, Jake and Rebecca Haro are arrested. They are formally charged with murder, child abuse, and filing a false police report. Authorities publicly state that the kidnapping never happened. Instead, they allege that Emmanuel died days earlier, possibly at home, and that the story of abduction was fabricated to hide the truth. August 27th. District Attorney Mike Hestrin makes a rare and direct public statement. He tells the media that Emmanuel's death appears to have been the result of long-term abuse injuries sustained over time, not a single incident. He also sharply criticizes the justice system's prior leniency in Jake's 2023 conviction, noting that a man previously found guilty of harming his infant daughter was somehow left free to care for another child. Late August. Search efforts continue in areas near the family's home and nearby freeways. Cadaver dogs are brought in. Law enforcement confirms they have strong leads as to the possible location of Emmanuel's remains, though no recovery has yet been made. These searches are ongoing. September 4th. Jake and Rebecca appear in court for their arraignment. Both plead not guilty. Rebecca arrives with a newly retained defense attorney, Jeff Haro, a high-profile lawyer known for taking on complex, high-stakes cases. Her decision to retain private counsel signals that this will be a contested case, not a quiet resolution. Their next court hearing is scheduled for mid-September, likely on the 16th or 17th. Prosecutors remain firm in their stance. They believe both parents are withholding critical information about what truly happened to baby Emmanuel. If you're following this, it's not just another story. Speak up. Emmanuel deserves to be remembered. Legally, this is one of the most complex child homicide cases Riverside County has faced in years, not just because of the charges, but because of what those charges say about broader systemic failures. Jake and Rebecca Haro are each charged with murder and filing a false police report. Both are being held on $1 million bail. Prosecutors allege that the false report, the kidnapping story, was not only a deliberate attempt to mislead, but also a key part of a broader cover-up effort to conceal the death of their son. From a legal standpoint, that added deception could weigh heavily in court. On the prosecution side, District Attorney Mike Hestrin is building a case that centers not only on Emmanuel's death, but on the justice system's prior handling of Jake Haro. In 2023, Jake was convicted of felony child abuse after his infant daughter sustained life-altering injuries. Despite the severity of the case, he was sentenced to probation and allowed to complete a parenting program. Prosecutors now argue that this leniency directly enabled Emmanuel's death, that it was, in their words, a justice system breakdown. By bringing that conviction into the current proceedings, Hestrin isn't just arguing that a crime occurred. He's arguing that it could have been prevented. It's a rare and pointed strategy, and one that may resonate with a jury. On the defense side, Rebecca Haro has retained attorney Jeff Haro, well-known figure in cases involving complex family dynamics and child abuse allegations. On the defense side, Rebecca Haro has retained attorney Jeff Haro, well-known figure in cases involving complex family dynamics and child abuse allegations. His presence signals that Rebecca may be preparing a defense that distinguishes her role from Jake's. Whether that involves presenting herself as misled, manipulated, or uninvolved remains to be seen. Jake Haro's legal team has taken a different posture, focusing on due process, confidentiality, and the presumption of innocence. His attorney has already raised concerns about media influence and the potential for a prejudiced jury pool, especially given the emotional nature of the case. One of the most striking developments so far is what didn't happen. The prosecution has reportedly refused to entertain any kind of plea deal. That's uncommon at this early stage, and it may signal that prosecutors believe both defendants are still withholding critical information. Whether that's about the circumstances of Emmanuel's death, the location of his remains, or who knew what and when, remains unclear. But it suggests a level of prosecutorial confidence and a belief that full accountability hasn't yet been reached. This is no longer just about one crime. It's about whether our justice system can recognize patterns of abuse and stop them before another child pays the price. The case of baby Emmanuel Haro has not only shaken a courtroom, it stirred a national conversation. Media outlets have followed the story closely. with coverage ranging from factual and sober to sensational and speculative. Major platforms like the Associated Press, CBS News, and People magazine have maintained a balanced tone focusing on court documents, prosecutorial statements, and verified investigative developments. But as the case picked up steam, tabloid coverage began to blur the line between information and intrigue. Headlines focused on visible bruises, emotional soundbites, and speculation about guilt, all of which can cloud public understanding and skew legal fairness. In high-profile cases involving children, this kind of coverage often triggers calls for media reform. This one is no exception. Meanwhile, public outrage has intensified, especially around one detail: Jake Haro's 2023 conviction. Many see that case not as a separate event, but as the missed warning that preceded Emmanuel's death. Online, hashtags calling for Emmanuel's law have gone viral, demanding stricter sentencing for individuals previously convicted of crimes against children. Advocates are pushing for legislative changes that would limit probation options in such cases and require mandatory child welfare monitoring for years, not months. In the local community of Cabazon, emotions remain raw. Some neighbors have voiced skepticism that Emmanuel will be recovered at all, citing the area's vast rural geography and the length of time that's passed. Others fear that abuse may have gone unreported or even ignored because the signs were too subtle or too uncomfortable to confront. It's a sobering reminder that behind every legal case is a deeper cultural question. What do we do when the warning signs are there, but the system doesn't act in time? So what do we know? And what's still unanswered in the case of baby Emmanuel Haro? We know that the original story of a public kidnapping in a parking lot was false. We know prosecutors believe Emmanuel died, not from a single incident, but from ongoing abuse. And we know that both parents, Jake and Rebecca Haro, are now facing serious charges. They remain in custody. They have pleaded not guilty. And the investigation continues quietly, persistently, with forensic evidence and search efforts still underway. But we don't yet know where Emmanuel is. His remains have not been recovered. The exact cause of death and the moment it occurred have not been conclusively proven in court. And perhaps most importantly, we don't know the truth that only two people likely hold: the truth of what happened inside that home. Legally, the case is just beginning. A preliminary hearing is set for mid-September, with motion hearings and evidence submissions to follow. Forensic results, digital records, and the defense's strategy will determine how this trial unfolds. But justice, in cases like this, is never fast. And it's rarely clean. This isn't just content, it's a legacy. Share this. Demand justice. If you're here, don't just listen, demand accountability. This case isn't just news, it's a life gone silent. Speak for Emmanuel, a child with no voice. Don't let him be forgotten. Shame is meant for inaction. Don't let it stop here. Let your conscience echo, comment, subscribe, share, because silence isn't innocent.